Welcome to Kingdom Talks.
Hello, everybody. Boy, I've been looking forward to this time. I'm Pastor Jerry Bryant, filling in tonight for Gil, and so honored that Gil and Nadina allow me from time to time to be a host and bring on special guests. And so this is a very unique opportunity again to share with you a very special man that I've watched grow up in the Lord from just a wee lad. I've known him a long time. And we want you to know that this is going to be a unique program in the sense that I think we're going to cover something that really needs to be talked about. I don't know that I've really seen seminars on this subject, or I don't know if anybody that I have watched or listened to is actually focusing on this. So it's extremely important. In other words, if you and I are committed to a new way of thinking, if you and I are committed to that passage of scriptures that invites us to come up higher, and we've said yes, so then how do we impart that to our children? How do we impart that to our grandchildren? I think that's a very significant question to ask, because as Bob Jones told us, that we really need to understand that, I think it was him, if not, it doesn't matter who said it, but my ceiling needs to be their floor. So wherever God's taking me in my life, and when that comes to a conclusion, then right there, others coming behind me, the next generation, can follow in my steps and go much, much higher. I know they will. But how do we train them? How do we invite them into this kingdom reality, this superior reality? I mean, honestly, it's so exciting that I can introduce to you tonight John Hendrickson from Kansas City. And John, I have wanted to have you on for a while now, and I'm so glad you were free, and I'm also glad you said yes. You're a part of the Ascended Life community in Kansas City, but as I alluded to, I met you when you were a young lad. I don't know if you even remember.
Nope.
I was pastoring the Vineyard Christian Fellowship in Nashville, and your family came in and did a concert, did a ministry night, and it was, of course, your dad and your mom and all the little siblings, and everybody had a part to play. I had no idea that all these years later I'd be connected to your father, Mark Hendrickson, and that I would get to know you better through our Ascended Life conferences and the things that you're doing. Would you just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit about what you're doing? I know, but I want people to understand. Now, this is not boasting. You're just giving us a chance to vet you. We're going to vet you and see what kind of things are you involved in your everyday life.
Sure. I'm John Hendrickson, and I make music for a living. I produce and engineer, also mix for products all around the world, predominantly Christian, and it's such a pleasure creating songs for people. And many of them, while you're working on it, you start crying, and you're like, this is the reason that I'm doing it. And that's super fun to be a part of. On the other side of that, I've got 4 kids.
Four kids.
I guess it's not on the side. It's predominant. Let's see if I can picture here.
Let's look at that. Tell me their names.
My wife is Cheryl, and my oldest son, Aslan, there in the red in the back. Eli is the one next to my wife in the black, and Elsa. And then Asher is the smallest one in the blue.
What a family. I've watched them play at some of our conferences. They're amazing, and they're very orderly and disciplined. I guess you and your wife have certain standards that they've learned. And hold on to that picture. We'll show it again a little later. And by the way, if you're just tuning in to Kingdom Talks, as always, you can chat on the side of your screen. You can ask questions. You can tell us your name, where you're listening, especially questions as we discussed tonight. Family Ascension. What a title. Yeah. Family Ascension. And most people wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about. Only those who've been practicing as a transitionary. I know of only one other family that really made an emphasis on this, and that was the late Christopher Carter. And
Okay.
his children both got really involved in understanding what Dad was teaching, and they became part. I mean, that became part of their life. And since his passing, they've actually had encounters with their dad in a very special way. Now, if
Wow.
this confuses any of you listening, stay tuned. We're not trying to twist you or in any way. We want you to know that God's up to something big. And it has to reach into the next generation. It just has to. Now, John, you're being very modest. I know for a fact that you've helped produce a lot of the music, the worship music at IHOP in Kansas City, International House of Prayer. I also know that you and your brother have been a part of Bethel Recordings out in Reading.
Yep.
So you've really had your hand in the worship end of things, plus being that's how you support yourself by
Yeah.
producing and writing and arranging. My goodness, you got so many gifts, and I have enjoyed so much watching you and your sister, leading worship at different conferences or when you come to the Well of Nashville in Nashville. I would totally love it if you guys both lived here. Your
Oh,
sister
man.
does, but you're in Kansas City, and so we'll have to just have you
Tricky.
come down from time to time.
Yeah, it's quite something growing up through the years with Lydia and my other siblings, getting to do some of the conference and events that we've been able to be a part of.
Right.
Sharing Mitesh Shabda, just different leaders, Patricia King, different people where the Lord's just really moving in the
Well,
room.
sure. Well, you
And
could drop names all night long.
oh,
I'm
but
sure.
it's just when you're getting touch as a musician, that's a plus right there. Not just playing the songs, but you're getting touch in the middle of a service or
Right.
playing or
Right.
even on the backstage stuff. So
I think that what we're going to talk about now is so significant for where we are and where God's going to take us. And again, I invite people to get involved in the chat, ask questions if they want. But John, you have a very interesting background that really, I think, qualifies you for what you're doing. And so I want you to tell your perspective of the story. There's this old guy that lived across the street from where you lived in Kansas City and occasionally would come over to dinner. You take the story right there and go ahead.
so as Jerry was saying, we were neighbors to Bob Jones and also really good friends with Bob Jones over the years. And actually, my brother Luke, some of his first steps were in his living room there. So that was a really cool privilege there. But he was just such a papa, such a father for us in
Right.
many ways, but definitely in the spirit realm and the kingdom and what we now know as just going into heaven. It's like a normal thing. He did that all the time. And while we were really little, he would sometimes give us a little side money, but he would call us his spiritual bank accounts.
Oh my!
And
How old do
yeah,
you think you were back then? How old were you?
anywhere from 2 to, well, he said that all the way up until at least 10, 11 or 10 or 11, that I remember. We would meet him in Kansas City, but then later on he moved to Moravian Falls and Florida and those periods too when we'd visit him over there in
Right.
Viola. Viola. They were just super, super loving and super warm. But we grew up around him, and often we'd be sitting in the living room, and he commands an authority where, as a kid, when you're 6 years old, 9 years old, you probably normally wouldn't be interested in somebody talking about heaven or talking about some things that are pretty deep. But the way that he presented it, it was just so simple and so easy. And as we're sitting there, he'd say, "Hey, hold out your hands," his little belly sitting out like that. And he'd say, "Hold out your hands. You feel that wind on that finger right there? If you feel the oil on that finger there, then that means this." And he'd say, "Well, what do you feel right now?" And I'd say, "Well, I think it's here." Well, he says in Revelations, he would talk about what that means, whatever I'm feeling at that moment. So that was a step into the prophetic of feeling and making the spirit realm more real.
Sure.
to me as a child, 6, 9, 10, even later. So I'm trying to go back to a time that I can remember. One of the most meaningful times going to heaven, and that was my first encounter that I can remember, was with him. And we were with a couple other friends in our family. And he had us all just stand in line. And he adored the Lord for a little bit. And then he says, "What do you guys see?" And just one by one, each of us kind of shared our story as we were going along. Well, to this day, I can still remember it like it was a normal, tangible experience that I experience now. And that's basically when I went into this vision. I went next to this picket fence, and there's a field off to the side, and I'm running along, and all of a sudden I come up to the end of this fence, overlooking like this waterfall, where the waterfall falls down in this pool. And I'm looking over there, and I'm talking to him with my eyes closed, and he's asking me, "What do you see? What do you hear? What's he saying?" And I'm just telling him as the images come to me. Well, I come over to this pool, and I look over to the side, and I see a waterfall. And he says, "Wow, oh really? Okay, you see a waterfall. Well, okay, tell me a little bit more." And as I'm sitting there looking at the waterfall, I said, "I see colors coming off of the waterfall. I don't know what are they? What are they?" And he kind of is helping me, coaching me how to understand what I'm seeing. And as I look at it a little bit deeper with his training, with his fathering, I look at that waterfall a little closer in those colors, and I realize that those are words. And there's words. I don't remember all the words what they were, but there were some of them. There were scriptures. Some of them were God's names. Other words that I didn't know at the time. They just were coming off the thing. Well, I told him what some of those words were, and he says, "Well, that's beautiful. What you saw really means this, this, and this." I mean, there was just so many things back to back that made heaven so real. And so since then, I've just always remembered that kind of milestone of heaven, or at least the beginning of it. Yeah.
John, I still think this is a remarkable story. Those who might be just tuning in, I'm talking with John Hendrickson from Kansas City, a part of the ALC community, Ascending Life or Ascended Life community. And if you can just imagine, as a young boy, his siblings and he would, let's say they'd sit around a dinner table with the prophet, Bob Jones, and at the end of the meal, Bob would say, "So what do you say we all go to heaven?" Yep. And so the kids, the Henderson kids would enter in, and Bob was instructing and training them at that very early age of the reality. Now, there's so many ways to encounter God. There's so many teachers and different persuasions, different ways of looking at, but all of it is embracing what God has for us. I just got back from being with Justin Paul Abraham in Wales, and Justin has a different approach, as does Liz Wright and also Nancy Cohen. They were both there, and John Scotland. And then there's many others that appear right here on Kingdom Talks that bring a peace. All of these things bring a peace. Our focus tonight, in case you've just tuned in, is how do we impart this to children, our grandchildren, our real, how do we give away what God has given us so that this next generation is very open to these encounters with God and this superior reality that he says, you're in me and I'm in you, Jesus said. We're one. And because of that, we can be where he is and we can do what he's doing. I mean, I'm still waiting, John, maybe you are too, for the greater works that he said we were going to do. But it starts with having an understanding of his heart, of his mind. And no greater or no better way to start than when you're young. So I guess at this point, I'd like for you to kind of turn the corner and say, when did you and your wife decide that you wanted to instruct the children? Or was it even much of a decision? It just happened? And how did you go about it? What was your first step?
Well, I'd say one, I grew up in a pretty special home that fostered that type of, or encouraged that type of thinking.
Hmm.
So it came pretty natural for me, and my wife is fully on board with it. Coming into our relationship and marriage, she just saw the Lord's handiwork in everything that we do, and she's like, "All right, I'm all in. I'm sold." But when it comes to ascended life type of things, um, I have always really chose to look at God and look at the whole Trinity in everything. And I would say more so in the early 20s. I was out and about and driving along, and all of a sudden I saw and realized that God is in everything. He's in the air. He's in the air that I breathe. And and he wants me to see him in all these
Hmm.
things. He wants me to touch him, and he wants me to experience him to on a deeper level. And uh, in that early time period, well, I should say 20s area, I seeing him and having that in my own personal encounter, like, okay, he is really in everything. He's in the air that I breathe. He's in the grass that grows. He's in the friend that's talking, going through a hard time. He's in all these things. Well, and with my kids, we have a little walk that we do from our house down to a parking lot that overlooks the sunset as it goes down, and it's so beautiful. Sometimes it's not so beautiful. Sometimes it's something special. Sometimes the storm's rolling in, and it's really interesting. Well, I really try hard, but it's even not that hard. I just do it. But I make a point to acknowledge the creativity of the Lord of in His handiwork in the creation of that sunset or that rain or that um, the way that the tree grew and the shadowscape laid out. The way that it did. It made it special
Hmm.
just for us. Right now, we're never going to experience the same exact moment again. How special is this? He made this just for us. And so for my kids to see that, it's and even grow up in that adoration of just adoring what God's creation is, I think it's so important, and not to lose sight of everything that He's created. And He loves giving a good gift after you adore those types of things. Obviously, He gives gifts all the time, but it's so special. And I'm sure He feels happy about it too when you adore those things and really make note of it. Even just a couple nights ago, I was with the kids in their room, and we were just talking story. And Elsa and Asher, they looked out the window and they said, "Daddy, look at the sunset. It's so beautiful." Just the simplicity of them going back and recognizing the sunset. Because I think so many people, we could just like go straight on the phone and we go, "Hey, yeah," we forget about the sunset. But there's something so beautiful and magnificent about something like that that was created just for us at that exact moment. And so heaven and these realities, I think, kind of slowly morph into
Yes.
the
Uh-huh.
next thing of just adoring the physical. Now we get to, because God's so good, He wants to give us good things. So what's this next thing that He has for us?
Right. So my guest tonight is John Hendrickson, who's part of the ALC community. Ascended Life community has been out there for a few years and offers, for those who might be interested, all kinds of free resources and training. I think every couple of weeks it's live, and then you can go back into the archives, watch all the past videos, as well as some special videos. Just simply go to www.alc.one. That's ALC.one. And I'm sure that your dad won't mind at all
No, I
us
love it.
telling, because more and more people are asking questions. And who do you talk to? If you have real interest, you can go there. You can go to Kingdom Talks Media. You have no reason not to engage in all that God is doing. So, John, again, let's just kind of give people an opportunity to see what you have done. Let's show the picture again, too, in a moment here, if you'd like. These are John's 4 children Oh my, they are amazing. And
Really
you live
good.
in Kansas City with your lovely wife,
Yep.
and you guys are intentional to train them to ascend. So the family is an ascension family, going up higher, involving themselves in kingdom life and experiencing the fullness. And there's so much more to experience. Why wait? Why wait? And tonight, or on this particular broadcast, because you'll hear it at different times, we're just trying to accentuate this possibility. So, John, I know that you were awakened by what Bob Jones did with you, and then you decided it's a great way to train the kids so they can get, familiar with these things. And I think you mentioned one point, and maybe a second. Let's go over those again of kind of how the steps you were that you took to get these, get these principles into the hearts of your children.
So following up from where we left off, basically adoring the Lord in all creation, and whether it's sunset, whether it's daybreak, whether it's the trees, the birds singing a song to you, or the Lord in somebody's heart, and you see that, recognizing those things and letting the kids see that you recognize those things. Even parking, we talk about Princess parking all the time, and we say, if literally a person's pulling out when we're coming into a store, we're like, oh, God gave us a parking spot. Like, it's a simple little thing, but I'm God's favorite, so he wants to give it to us. So the kids see that and they experience that same kind of reality. And I love celebrating it with them. I love celebrating the Lord through it. So my kids get to experience that too.
Okay, adoring the Lord, not just worship songs, but in everything in creation. What would be the number two?
Sorry, say that one more time.
And then what would be number two, or another one on the list of how you did this?
In basic, helping my kids. Let's see. We
Because I'm
listen
sure
to.
it just comes natural, a lot of it, and just happens spontaneously. But we want
I'll
to.
give you one that I gave a couple nights ago. Just a couple nights
Okay,
ago.
great, sure.
Story time. So you can have a story time with your kids, and that's awesome. You can talk about princess and king.
Yeah.
Thing went along, and it was totally fictional, fun, and the kids had they were on the edge of their seat a lot of the time. It was awesome. I don't know if I could ever replicate it, but what if you take story time to another level and you let Jesus tell you a story? It makes me cry.
That's an idea.
What if you let Jesus tell you a story? And
Yeah.
so I told the kids, I said, the kids were like, Daddy, tell us a story. I'm kind of tired, I'm like, you know what? Let's just let Jesus tell us a story. So I said, all right, everybody scoot over. And they're all coming in from their bedrooms, and we sit down on the bed. We lean back, and I said, all right, everybody close your eyes. Put out your hands just like this. All right, Jesus, you're so good. And we just talk about him. We just talk about how fun he is, and how involved he is in our lives, and how we love that connection, and just adoring him, just loving on him. And this is part of another step process that I'm going to tell, but this is part of the story time that we had. And so we're doing that. And I said, while your hands are out, let Jesus now touch your hand. He's sitting right next to you. Let him touch your hand. Okay. So now their hands open, and now Jesus's hand is starting to collapse into theirs.
Wow.
And I told each of the kids, now this is the process. And it's similar. I kind of take the process of how Bob Jones taught us, kind of walking us through our golden imagination, because some of us see stuff, but we don't know what we're seeing. And we're not sure if it's real, if it's not, or what. But I'm kind of helping them understand with the best that I know. And obviously, Holy Spirit knows a lot more than I do. And so he's kind of guiding me through the process, which not kind of, he's fully. And
John,
so,
that's so good. Yeah.
so I'm holding my hand out like this, and they're all holding their hands out, even my 6-year-old. So 6, 8, 8, 10, and 11-year-old. They're all holding their hands out. And as I say, Jesus is now putting his hand in yours. I ask my oldest, I say, do you feel Jesus' hand in your hand right now? Aslan, do you feel it? He says, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then Eli, I said, Eli, let me know when you feel it. Do you feel him right next to you? Do you feel him in your hand right now? Yeah, I feel them. And then I went down the list. I went to Asher. Yeah, I feel him. Okay, cool. Now we're there. Okay, so now we're all together. We're on the same page. I've kind of painted a picture that he's sitting right next to them, and Jesus is in their hand right now, or he's in their hand. Yeah. And so they're sitting there, and to make it just a little bit more real, I love to connect natural things. So if I were to feel your neck, I would feel a pulse if you're alive, right? Or if I were to feel your wrist, I would feel some kind of pulse. Or sometimes when you're really, really going to it, you feel some action. All of a sudden, you feel like a pulse in your hand here.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Yeah.
what if he's so in love with us that I could feel his pulse in my hand? And so I'm not telling them that's what I'm thinking. I'm just thinking that would probably be a pretty good thing to talk about. Okay, so Holy Spirit, thank you. And I just tell the kids, I'm like, do you feel his pulse in your hand? Do you feel that? Tell me
Whoa.
when you feel the pulse. And so it wasn't instant. It was just a little bit, I went kind of random through the kids. And then finally everybody said, now they feel it. So their eyes are still closed and they're still experiencing whatever they're experiencing right next to him. Well, the next step is part of the other chronological thing. I kind of want to just share this because this is really special. But I'll get to the other one chronologically. So I've got their hands, their eyes are closed, they're holding Jesus' hand. Now I say Jesus is now going to grab your other hand. He's going to get in front of you and he's going to hold both hands, and now he's facing you. Okay, now do you feel him looking at you? Do you feel that? You might not see him yet, but do you feel him looking at you? And after a little bit, finally they kind of start saying, yeah, I feel him. I can see him. I can experience him. Okay, yeah, he's looking at me. He's looking me in the eyes. And most of the time they can't, or they haven't been able to see distinguishable details, but they know what he looks like and they know that he's happy. They just know it and they can see that happiness.
Well, so you're making a grid here for them to learn to experience with the senses the presence of God and feel comfortable with it, not afraid. And I remember one time you demonstrating this at one of our Ascended Life conferences, where you had them wait on the Lord and draw on a paper different things that they were seeing in the spirit when they were ascending. Now, tonight, in this program, if you just tuned in, we're talking about a family ascending together, children being trained and given an opportunity to learn how to encounter God in these ways. So at this conference, everyone had a piece of paper and different crayons. Take it from there. What was the purpose of that demonstration?
So a good friend of ours, Craig Dinsmore, he helped facilitate this and encouraged me. And now I do it anytime I feel inspired or I feel like I'm itching for something to do with the kids. But basically, you adore the Lord for a little bit, maybe the whole time, whatever. But you take a moment, you just love the Lord. And you say, God, if you have more thoughts about me than the grains of the sand of the sea, then that means you probably have a couple things just for me that I need to know right now.
Okay.
What are a couple of those things that are on my mind? What are a couple of those things that are on your mind? And what's on your heart? And within moments, usually, sometimes there's background music going on and that kind of just helps stir the atmosphere a little bit. But within moments, you just kind of look around the room and you say, does anybody have anything? And now, almost all the time, there's a good handful of people right away that raise their hands. And we say, okay, if you saw something, why don't you go ahead and write all those details down on that paper? Use every color that you saw in that picture that the Lord showed you. And And so you start drawing those things, and those things might not mean a lot to some people. It's so special for that person to see. And then what's really fun is they might have gotten touched drawing, but seeing it. But when they start drawing it, you'll just see tears starting to roll down their face. Even my own. Sometimes I'm like writing it out. It's kind of like when you're speaking it into existence. You're kind of speaking life into it. Well, here you are. You're drawing this into something that's tangible. Oh, it's real. I'm with him. This is where. Oh my word, that's a real path. It starts becoming reality. Actually, this is a really cool story. A month and a half ago, I was helping teach at this music camp. And one of my classes, they were 5 to 9 year olds. It was 12 5 to 9 year olds. So a good handful of kids playing violins, pianos, singing, and it was great. Well, I wanted to help them be okay with creating. And so I did that same thing. Lord, if you have more thoughts about me than the grains of the sand of the sea, then I want some of those thoughts. I want to know one of those things and those feelings that you feel over me. What do you think? You dance over me? What does that mean? So I talked with these kids just briefly, and they're all holding a piece of paper and one little marker or whatever color they had. We didn't have a box full of crayons. It was just really simple pencil or a marker. And so they're holding it, and I said, okay, now, and they didn't know what we were going to do next. I said, now we're going to draw whatever we saw. And to tell you the truth, a couple of weeks prior to this day, I was informed that not everybody in this class, as far as parents, might believe the same direction that I believe, or we choose to believe. But the Lord loves taking care of his kids. And what's drawing a picture? If Jesus shows you something, then write it out, So that's what we did. We basically I said, you're going to draw whatever Jesus showed you to draw. And here you go. So everybody goes around. They draw some beautiful pictures. One drew a rainbow, and it was God and him inside of the rainbow, holding hands, just being in love under this rainbow in the promise. It was really beautiful. And then there's crosses. That's a really common occurrence to see crosses on the hill, or maybe Jesus isn't on the cross, or maybe Jesus was on the cross, and then he's not on the cross. Well, it got to this one girl, and she didn't want to show the picture. And I said, oh, no worries, we'll just move on. So we go down the line, and everybody else starts showing us things. Well, when it gets down to everybody's done except for this girl, they said, John, what did you see? I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I didn't see anything because I was trying to help you guys. I was facilitating you guys going. But you know what? I'm not going to say anything to them. I said, you know what? Just a second. Let me see if I can remember. So I just closed my eyes for about 10 seconds. Stepped over the threshold, and I was in a kitchen, and it was a beautiful kitchen, just a normal kitchen, just normal.
Yes.
And I looked out through this windowsill, and I looked at a little prairie out in the distance, and there was a little flower in the window. It was really pretty. And I thought, I'm just going to share that. So I told the kids, I said, I saw myself in a kitchen, and I can't draw it out right now, but I'm just going to tell you what I saw. I saw myself in a kitchen, and I was looking outside of this window, and it had a little flower in it, and it looked like it was just beautiful at this prairie. Well, it turned out that girl, after I shared it, that's what she drew.
Oh my!
And her
confirmed
mom,
it. Yeah,
100% confirmed it, and she's about 7 years old. I guess her mom, they do that at their church. They do this type of drawing and welcoming this type of atmosphere. Well, she's kind of been in the back wondering if it's real, wondering if this is just her imagination and not really something that's so special from God. Well, the next day she says, you have no idea what that means to her, because she told me like that God is telling her that this is real by you telling her that you saw the exact same thing that she drew.
Isn't that amazing, John, that he uses the simplest things to confirm his presence? Yeah. And by the way, John, you're an easy interview. I don't have to ask you many questions. And you have so inspired us tonight. Rick and Karen are watching, and along with Susan Carter. I'm going to look at the script here for a moment. I've been so caught up in this conversation, so inspired. But different ones have, said that this is extremely encouraging to them. And and love to engage in heavenly places, maybe just hadn't thought, can the children do this? Can our grandchildren? Of course.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to. Here's one from Regina. She says, I see his glory covering the world. And when I acknowledge the truth of this, and for example, a tree, I experience that tree looking at me, emanating his love.
I love it.
Isn't that great? Here's another one. Susan is there with Eileen. So, hi, how are you guys doing? Your dad says, go for it. He's such an encourager, isn't he?
Yep.
Let's see who else we have here. Quite a few people have responded. Brooke has responded. A number from Facebook and probably some from YouTube will come on. But if you have a question for John, put it on our chat, and we'll try our best to. Here's one right here. How do you connect with the Ascended community? I'm assuming they want to know about Ascended Life.
Yep.
It's just simply ALC.one, ONE, and John's a part of that, and you can get all kinds of free resources every 2 weeks. It's a free class for a couple of hours, and you can watch all the archives. I don't know if this will be in the archive, but maybe we should do this again and talk about how to train and make a platform for our children or our grandchildren, if their parents will permit you to do it,
Yeah.
and let them be aware of these supernatural realities that they can encounter. I think, imagine that. I mean, I think this is how we will be able to impart to the next generation. I'm so glad you came on. Again, I want to ask you again, in particular, is there a set time you do this? I'm getting the impression that it's more spontaneous, or maybe at night. People a lot of times will read a Bible story or pray with their children, and you're letting that be an opportunity as a family to ascend. Now, as the whole group, do you sit around like in the living room, the whole group, and have a little session, or is it more one-on-one?
So when I mentioned earlier, laying in the bed, that's story time. So there was 4 of us in that period.
Okay.
We also homeschool our children, and one of the subjects that we teach is Bible. And we just open up, a life pack is what we're doing. And so you open it up and you're just reading along, and questions come out of there. They're like, well, if God created the earth, then what was before the earth? Well, that's a really good question. And then you start diving in, and any questions that you feel like you don't know, then we said, well, let's ask God. Let's ask Jesus right now. What does he think it was like before? What does he want to show us what it was like before? So we let that imagination of God's kind of fill our hearts and our minds. The other one, we'll sit in the living room, and I'll just tell the kids, I say, guys, let's close our eyes for a minute. They might be running around, giddy-upping, they just had a bunch of ice cream. And you know what? We're just going to take a chill pill for a little bit. We're going to lay down. We're going to turn on some soft music.
Yeah.
And no words, just something that's very soft, no distinct pattern to it, no distinct rhythm. And we just close our eyes. And if I feel like Holy Spirit, if my wife feels like something that's going on, then we just make something of it. And we just follow the impressions that the Lord gives us along the way. It's not really a methodical type experience that we do. As far as getting into it, the initial process, it's more so when we feel it. But those are kind of the places that we might do it. Sometimes my wife and I will be driving, and I'll just have an experience, or she'll have a little experience. Like one time we were on the way out to Colorado, and she says, I felt the angels driving next to us. They're flying next to us. The angels that were protecting our house are protecting our trip with us. And we're open with that. We're open to talking about the supernatural realm being more natural. And so here he is. Here they are. They're right there alongside of us.
John, again, you're teaching them to think supernaturally natural in the way that from heaven to earth, and just encountering God in every dimension of creation. Every uh, thing that happens can be a God moment, a theophany, which is a God sighting.
Yeah.
And these children of yours, by the way, if you all just tuned in, you want to replay this. If you're a part of our partnership, we're going to go in a deeper dive when we get off the air here. And John and I are going to get into some maybe a little more details. So you want to be sure. And you can go to kingdomtalksmedia.com and find out how to become a partner, how to get involved in helping support this very important ministry. But I'm so glad that when I met you as a little guy in Nashville, I never ever dreamed we'd both be talking about an ascended life family.
Oh, it's
And I just have to believe that God set this up so that other families watching right now go, why didn't I think of that? And I know some do, but they would take advantage of these opportunity. I mean, these ideas and these things that you're finding effective. I know this is the question. Kids are kids, but when they encounter the power of God, things kind of change. I remember Kathy Walters and her husband came to the vineyard, and they had Sailor Bob with them, Captain Bob, and he had all the children come up, and he just invited Holy Spirit to come. And one by one, most of them went down in a gentle way on the floor and were not able to move for about 30 minutes. Now, you can't get a child to sit there and not squirm on the floor. I went to Peru, and the same thing happened there. When I took the Holy Spirit came in power one night outside. It was even a cold night. The ground was cold. And one by one, these, just by gently laying hands on their head and releasing his kingdom, his presence, they're out and they don't even budge for 20 minutes. But how do you, this is the question. Kids are kids. They might have a little infighting. They may have a little attitude issues. How do you get them settled down so you can get into one of these things? Is it just, I mean, they know the higher values because they've experienced them, but again, they're dealing with the soul mind here, and those things can be a distraction. So, any particular insights on that for us?
I say I'll give you $100. No.
No. Love it.
No. I think every kid's different. You've got feelers and you've got thinkers.
Yes.
And some of my feeler kids, they're in it right away, and they can be in an argument and then all of a sudden in the Lord's presence right away. And to them, it might be in conjunction. But, from early on, we just say, we're going to chill out for 5 minutes. We're going to chill for 5 minutes. After that, you guys can go play. You can do whatever you want to do, or you can go talk with your friends or whatever. It's simple. But right now, we're just going to do 5 minutes of family time. Just like you would ask for 5 minutes before bedtime. Right now, I'm asking that I give you 5 minutes, or you give me 5 minutes. And in the end, they realized that it wasn't just for me. It was also for God, and the importance of separating or combining those is probably pretty cool for them down the road. I'm sure they'll see it when they get older. But like my, I won't say the name, but I'll just say my thinker son, the other day, we were focusing on something that was in the dream, but I really wanted it to be tangible for him. I really wanted him to experience something in the spirit in a natural way. And so a long time ago, we talked about this experience that he had, and he walked through it, and it was pretty easy for him. But I wanted to see if he could revisit that spot again. And so as we're walking, everything was a matter of fact to him. He was saying what he saw before, which is awesome. And he walked A, B, C. He walked through all the things again. His eyes were closed. And I said, what about this tree right here? Do you remember that tree? Oh yeah, I remember that tree. I said, do you remember touching your hand against the tree? He says, yeah. I said, do you remember feeling the bark? He says, what's so important about the tree? And I said, it's not necessarily about the tree. I'm just trying to make it more real to you. I want you to feel the bark. I want you to feel that texture. So that way, when you go back to the spot, it's reality to you. It's just as
Right.
reality there as it is here.
Right.
And he's like, okay. I said, well, think of it this way. People dream and dream and dream to be an astronaut. And some people dream and dream and dream to be a fireman. And some people dream and dream and dream to be a police. You get the point. And at some point, many of those people become an astronaut, become a fireman, become a policeman.
Right.
And here I'm trying to help him. Okay, you just dream and dream and dream. We're going to try to keep pulling textures out until it becomes your reality or another part of your
Becomes
reality.
reality. Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that because you are giving some oversight, facilitating, changing the atmosphere, and giving them something to think about when they realize they can go back through the same portal and encounter some things. And that could be pretty adventuresome, to periodically go back and see how things have changed. Folks, we've got about 10 minutes left, but there's still time for you to respond. If you have anything you'd like to put in the chat and ask questions. John Hendrickson has been with me on this program. So thankful to Gil and Nadina for allowing us to do this tonight. We want to encourage you, if you've not thought about this before, that your children and grandchildren can be, I think they can be trained by the Holy Spirit. They can actually feel the presence of God and be able to encounter Him in pretty supernatural ways. I imagine they could start a conversation in the schoolyard. It could be, yeah. Any suggestions for teenagers? Michelle's asking, John.
Currently, I don't have.
Go ahead.
Currently, I don't have any teenagers, but I do know that if you're doing it yourself and there's fruit in it, they're going to be inspired to do the same. If there's not much fruit in what you're doing, then they're probably not going to eat from that same tree for a while. So if they see fruit and you go into heaven and they see that experience, I'm sure that they're going to be blessed and eventually tap into some inspired direction, hopefully with you. That'd be awesome.
Well, again, example is the best teacher, isn't it? Mm. And don't hesitate to. I have an older daughter, then I don't think she'd be embarrassed with me to say that I will tell her occasionally about some of my encounters. I know the name of the angel that rides with her in her vehicle, and she seems to be open and accepting of some of that, even though maybe secretly she thinks I've lost my mind. But I know in God's timing, this is going to be so commonplace that everyone who loves the Lord are going to have these encounters. Their family are going to be caught up. Oh, isn't that a great thought right there? When your kids are acting up, say, Lord, just catch them up in the spirit and calm their little souls as they look upon the glory and they worship the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. If folks want to reach you, John, I guess it would be through can't talk tonight, ALC.1, and they could write you there and find out about the school. Every couple of weeks they do, and all the past archives. We're going to hope that we'll do another conference here soon. Have you come here in Nashville for a Sounds of Glory Nashville conference. Well, folks, it's been so good to have you on board. John, it's been a delight to talk to you again.
It's a pleasure.
And for those who stay tuned in a few moments, we're actually going to be able to do a deeper dive. That means I'm going to keep John on for a little longer, and we're going to ask some important questions. And you can, even in the meantime, send me a note if you'd like to, right here at Kingdom Talks Media. And we'll do our best to direct you in the right direction. John Hendrickson, He's from good stock. John, I don't know how you go to sleep at night, but I put my head on the pillow and I'm out in 15 seconds. When you got 4
Exactly
kids,
the same. Oh, exactly the same.
you know, I mean, it's so good. Thank you so much. And people said that it's refreshing, and they love that we're incorporating, you know, some of these really intentional moments that you're having with your children. Again, thank you so much for your time with us. And stay tuned for the Deeper Dive, folks. If you'd like to reach me, I'm at www Sounds of Glory Nashville, or you can find it on Facebook anytime you'd like to. I'm not sure if there's anything else we can do in this segment, but if you'll stay tuned, there'll be a lot more coming. Take care now. God bless.